That's all right.
Jenny Pape is an award-winning sound artist and songwriter. Her albums include Torch Ditties, These Are My Neighbors with the Jenny Johnson Band, The Ballads of Makanda, which she wrote, produced, recorded, and performed on NPR's live production of Planetary Radio with Matt Kaplan, Miss Jenny and the Howdy Boys, and last week's compilation release, We Are for Egypt. When not on stage or in the recording studio, Professor Pape has worked in commercial radio as a disc jockey, producing audio documentaries, radio dramas, and sound art pieces. Please give a warm welcome for SIU's own, here in the School of Media Arts, Professor Jenny Pape. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy you're here, and you just told me before we began that you're sort of coming down off the We Are for Egypt release, which
Yes.
I have been listening to nonstop, and it's just incredible. I mean, you have such a voice. It's such a great recording, and I love this idea that this tapestry that you created. So what I've understood from the YouTube video explaining it was that Stacy Davidson was an Egyptology professor that contacted you and then said to make an album that sort of helps us understand Little Egypt, or why this area of Southern Illinois is Little Egypt. And so you created 5 traditional songs and then 5 modern new songs to go with it. Is that right? And how did this all come about? And, tell us more about it.
Oh, absolutely. I find this is a 1.5 year long project, so I finally have gotten it down to to know how to talk about it, So Stacy, we didn't know each other before this. She just found me off Google. She was looking up Ballads of Southern Illinois, and then she had found a previous project I had done, the Ballads of Makanda, which is about local histories and oral histories and stories, fables, local lore of Makanda. And she'd found that. She was like, wow, I just got this grant where I am researching the history of the Egyptian identity of Southern Illinois, and I want to put this into a musical album form. So she was like, I want you to do what you did on that album, and I want you to do it again, but bring in more artists, because it's a large area and we want to have multiple perspectives. I was like, wow, this is a dream project for me. To be able to, include collaborators is so much fun. It just, so I didn't have to write a full album's worth. I just did 2 songs. So I did 1 original, 1 traditional. And then I had to find, who would be the other songwriters in this area. And, what was important to us was a diversity of perspectives. So we had Regina Zavala, who is this really incredible Honduran songwriter that is from Honduras, but she lived in Southern Illinois for several years. She actually just moved back right before the release, unfortunately. But she wrote this beautiful song about, it's called Somos Igual, which means we're all the same. And it talks, she likens these different verses to different communities in the area. So like the folks who come down to study here are like butterfly, or they're like owls learning, and the people who immigrate to this area, they're like butterflies. It's just such a beautiful song. It's in English and Spanish.
And you chose that song as the opening of the album too,
Yes.
right? So
yes, because I was like, man, well, it was just so beautiful. It was truly just that was the order of how I chose. Was like, some people do it like, some people do concept albums where each thing goes from one thing to the next. For me, I was like, I like this song the best.
Llegaron junto a las mariposas, under the wings of their ancestors. They harvested their land and made themselves.
I'll make it fade really nice into the next thing, like it would, like a regular radio show, like you're used to. But for the sake of this, since it's live, it's not as pretty. But that's another beautiful thing about the tapestry of We Are for Egypt. You have such a diversity going too, right?
Yeah.
So there was the other song that I really, really love, which was La, I don't know if I'm saying this right, La Guiane, the Prairie de Rocher Singers.
Yes. Yes. And this is Southern Illinois, so we say Prairie de Rocher.
Oh, Prairie de Rocher.
Yes, I
Do you
know.
want to explain this song a little bit and how it came about?
Yeah, so that is a 300-year-old tradition in Southern Illinois. When the French settlers came to this area, they brought this song along with it, and it's a New Year's Eve song. And folks in Prairie du Rocher, which is like an hour on our western border, folks have been singing this for 300 years and passing it along from generation to generation. And a friend of mine was the fiddler and singer for this group of people. Has been going down there for years, and he's sort of the new generation. And he introduced me to everybody else. The main singer, Jerry Franklin, who's carrying this legacy, and they're hoping to get folks to pass this on to. It's incredible, and it's French. It's all in French.
So beautiful. And it's great that you sort of have this thing. It reminds me of I don't know if you're familiar with Harry Smith. When I was going to Naropa, he was the one that created that sort of American folk, and he would record all the things. But also I hear so many other, like, this history of American songwriting and all the things that you do. So I hear like Steve Forbert, I hear Loudon Wainwright, I hear Annie DeFranco, I hear Utah Phillips, I hear Richie Havens, I hear Dan Byrne. And I'm just curious also your influences, because I even hear like Gwen Stefani in some of your songs, believe it or not. I hear like pop influences as well, right? Like even in a song like Boomer.
Yeah. As an 80s kid, I loved No Doubt as like a teenager, and so Gwen Stefani all the way. My influence, God, who are my influences? I love soul singers, which is funny that I ended up doing like more Americana, country, folk, soul music. But like I think probably my main influence is like vocally, I love what like Billie Holiday does with her voice. I love what Ella Fitzgerald does vocally. Like I love vocal people who do big power vocals things and beautiful nuanced singing melodies. But I also like, I just consume music and like all across the board. I love Metallica. I love there's so much I love. So, I love folk music. I love Americana music. I love Mavis Staples, who is an Americana soul artist. I would say she's been somebody I've been listening to for the last 7 years. I don't know, I'm real transient that way. I just I latch on for this person for a while, then I move on to the next person. I just I'm like a sponge with that. So.
I also noticed that, there are many incantations of your band. So there's like the Jenny Johnson, there's the Miss Jenny, and but in all of them, this is like a gigging band that's alive in a place and living among people. And if I can quote the Dirty Dale song, it's like all the rednecks and the hippies seem to get along, and then there's this other line that I love. All I have are cords and the shirt on my back. Will they understand everything I want to be? So it's almost like you give us this place of Southern Illinois, not only in We Are for Egypt, but we get it in Miss Jenny and the Howdy Boys. We get it in Makanda too. When we go to like the big one and we talk about living in the valley in the flash flood, or even in is it Light Orchards, where it's our family came here in 1818 and all this. It's just kind of incredible. One thing, if you can talk a little bit about, is how you're able to capture that live sound, like, because that's really, really difficult. So it still feels like a band that's alive, yeah, and like they're in the studio. So like, are you recording with the mics there, and it's like all the band is there in the place? Are they in booths? Are things, are you recording drum and bass track first, like we normally do, or are you doing it a different way?
I would say like what's quintessential to like our sound across the board and the way we operate is I go in very, very well practiced with the group of people that I'm in. These aren't like people that are unfamiliar to me, that are, you know what I mean? Like, we're very tight as a group. We practice and practice. Like, we digest a song until we can play it with our eyes closed. You know what I mean? So like, it's not like we're trying it for the first time in the studio and like, let's just see what comes up, what may. Like, we work really, really hard to be tight because we're trying to move with each other, and that's very important. And that comes from like playing show after show after show together. So all these songs have been played out in public several times before we actually record. So I think that is something that's very important to me. And everybody works differently. Some people just go in and get session players. They're like, oh yeah, lay something down, that's great. But to me, it's like important to vibe for a long time with a song and with the people who play it. But as far as the technical stuff, We Are for Egypt was done. We typically would do like a rhythm section together. Typically, not always. Like bass and drums, we tried to keep at the same time happening to keep a strong rhythmic foundation. Really important, like on Regina's song Somos Igual, we did, just due to timing, we had to record the drums and the bass separately, and that was a little tricky because those were Latin rhythms, and so they were just a little bit trickier. So we paid for it with a lot more editing and post. But thankfully, I actually had a wonderful student engineer who I hired for one of my former students. I hired him to do that. His name is Alex Jockish, and he is the president of the RSO Digidog here. And I hired him to be a part of this project, and he was absolutely wonderful at what he did. And so I'm thankful for his editing skills. But for like Miss Jenny and the Howdy Boys, that was live. Like, we were all in the same room together, and we laid everything down instrumentally together. And you can really hear it, I think, like on Sweet Release, like everything there is what it is. Like, there's no overdubs, I don't think, on that song at all. On some of the other songs in the Miss Jenny and the Howdy Boys album, that one we did almost all live. Yeah.
Don't tell me to smile. Don't call me your little lady. I didn't wear these boots, this skirt, this dress just to give you a thrill. I like looking good.
Man, I forgot about that video. That was so much fun. I'm not a video person, Pirooz, so like this was like I've done some video work, but like, what do you do when you release an album during the pandemic? Like, how do you promote it creatively? So that was our method.
I think it was great. I thought it was so good, and such a great song too. Don't tell me to smile without an invitation. So cool that you were, sort of creating a feminist song on that album too. And I really like that album because it's like, you not only have the theme of location and place, but you also have you have that song thrown in, but you also have you always have this like nice balance where there are at least 3 or 4 songs about love or relationships. And so it's almost like you give us a whole window into the universe of a town. And it's like, it's our town, you know, and I really feel it. I really feel like I'm in the space. And it makes me very proud to be a Southern Illinoisian now, if I can claim to be. And I just want to read this thing, and this is part of the Makanda, and it's a little byline that you wrote on the record. You said, it's just a part of it. As more young people leave rural areas for economic opportunity, people still remain within these regions, living vibrant lives. These subcultures exist with stories inextricably linked to their environment and relationships to each other. And so that was the theme and the thesis of that work that you did, but it's sort of been the theme and the thesis of your entire discography, right? It's like, I feel that heartbeat all through all of your music. And it makes me want to get up. It makes me want to shout. It makes me want to be a part of it. It makes me want to come to your shows. So I'm just curious, for you as a visual storyteller, are you going around looking at your town? Are you looking at people? Are you sort of doing like the Woody Allen thing? Are you going on the park bench and then looking out at Giant City to get that song? Or what is it? What is it that sort of brings it all about? And how did you come up with that?
Well, thank you for all the very wonderfully said things so far. Like you really nailed it, my style. So thank you. As far as, okay, so for the most part, I feel like all these things come pretty organically from conversations. And, when you sit down and you're playing and you're starting to mess around, you realize that all those things that are just a part of the daily life bubble up. And then it's like you have to give yourself permission that this little tiny moment or exchange is good enough for a song, and you're like, oh, this seems mundane as it like comes out, but you're like, oh no, that's just life. Like these little moments that come out, you're like, oh, that is a song. Like that is a moment. Like this experience I have, in this tiny flyover state, like it's something, it means something, and it will resonate with other people. So I feel like they just kind of bubble up organically from these exchanges. You sort of just recognize for a moment, you're like, oh, this is like this, I keep thinking about this thing, so I'm gonna have to transfer that to somewhere else. It feels just organic. Although the Ballads of the Makanda, because I had like set myself a project, like I knew I wanted to write songs about Makanda because I was just fascinated. That was more, I definitely took more initiative to like go out and find stories. So like gosh, we like exchanged like exchanged like a 6-pack for stories. Like we would sit and I'd be like, I'm going to give you some beers and you're going to tell me some stories. And we would sit down and they would tell me stuff, and always the best stuff. They were like, well, you can't tell anybody this. This is just,
oh, that's brilliant. So it was almost like porch stories. So that's sort of like the Ditties one, that other record, it's similar, right? It's sort of like, I'm going to sit around, and then once you heard the story, then the song would come out of that story, right?
Yeah.
So which one on the record is the most like that? Would it be the Giant City one, or?
Gosh, that's hard to tell.
Or Light Orchards, right?
Light Orchards, definitely. I sat and talked with Sarah Light for a while, and that was just really, she's not a drinker, so we didn't like have any drinks, but she just sat and let me hang out in her orchard for a while.
Our family came here 1818. We built this farm growing nearly fruit trees and shipped it all across the Illinois Central. All alone buys that way anymore. When Daddy died, Mama kept on working. And it's been years, and now the middle of all gone. People used to
Really?
Yeah, I practiced so hard, and it's okay.
I think it's a great song. It's a great record too. I love the way it opens one way and then it takes us on a whole completely different journey the rest.
Thank you.
In particular for me, I love Dry Town so much, especially that beautiful sax sound that comes out. Did you play the saxophone on that, or was it somebody else?
Yeah.
That was you
No.
playing?
God, no, that was no, that was Kevin Olau, my good friend who's a multi-instrumentalist. He's incredible. Yeah.
Do you mind if we listen to do a little bit of that too?
Yeah.
So you work with so many different artists. You're constantly gigging.
Yeah.
You're in the studio. You're doing all of this for my producing students, for my directing students, right? For your producing and directing students too. How do you manage to get along and collaborate with everyone without everyone killing each other? Because you're literally putting on events. You're doing them week in and week out. And you've got to do it again and again, and you've got to build that consistency.
Yeah.
How do you manage to do it? Because I know even people that I've worked with in the entertainment industry, they're doing music. They're like, I don't even want to record artists anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's too difficult. They're like too hard. And I'm just curious, have you formed a way of dealing with artists when you record them? Do you have a secret in dealing with people that makes it so that you've been able to just gel? It seems like you have it, like whatever you've got. I'm just curious what the magic behind it is.
It's be kind is the most important thing. be kind, and you set the tone. As a producer, you set the tone of all the future interactions. So the way you handle a situation, other people will see that and they will act accordingly. So if there is a situation, you need to keep your cool, and you need to be kind and always, be transparent, be honest. It's kind of just goes down to like be a good person. If you are calm, confident, and kind, that is the most important thing, more than talent, surprisingly. Actually, when I was working with my engineer, and he was really, this was his first like big collaboration with people, and he was somewhat nervous, and he had the same sort of thing, like what's the most important thing to you on this project? And I was like, you have to make sure everybody feels valued. When you're in the studio, they need to feel valued, so their contribution is very important. It's the reason why you're doing this, so you have to just make sure that they leave here feeling good about what they've done. Even if it's a hard day in the studio, it can be a hard day and you can still feel value in that. You know what I mean? Because we all have hard days. So you need to find the framework to make it work. You know what I mean? So you set the tone, be kind, be confident. That's keep your cool, because problems are going to happen. Like, you need to expect that it's going to happen. And I've never had a perfect album where everything just fits so smoothly. Like, things are going to come up, and you just have to anticipate how you deal with that. And people will watch, and they'll keep note. And if you lose your cool, then you probably won't get as many calls back for things. So that's
and just one more question on that one, because you sort of brought it up. When you do find that an artist is being difficult, or you run into difficulties, whether or not the artist is being difficult or not, do you find that it's more about their process? Because I was reading recently how someone was criticizing Joaquin Phoenix and saying that he was a difficult actor. And then another director was like, well, not necessarily. This is just part of the process. And so you kind of need to be open to working with them and letting them move through that process. And they said that they welcomed that kind of intensity because they would never get a performance like that if they weren't willing to push themselves to certain extents that some people expect a performance to be like a snap, but for others they need to find it in different ways. And I'm just curious about your experience with artists in that way too, from a musical standpoint.
Yeah. Um, it's so fun to work with artists, and it can be challenging. I I feel like the problems always happen when you're rushing, and you're like, well, we just got to get this done, and then you take that attitude, and then they don't have time to do their process. You know what I mean? So if you just slow down, and if it means more time, it means more time. You know what I mean? Take the time you need to take. If it takes one artist a little bit longer, that's their process. And if you want a good product, that's what you got to do. Um, with that, there are also deadlines. So I understand that too, where you're like, well, this has to be done. So you have to let them know, like, okay, realistically, this is what I can afford. Like, we can take an extra day, but it can only be a half day. You know what I mean? Like, you have to set the boundaries you need. So you're balancing. Welcome to being a producer. You're balancing, but it's usually fun. And I love it. I love doing it. It's hard, exhausting, meaningful work. You know, there's meaning to it. So
And if I can just do one more question before I open it up to Nick. Nick looks like our one surviving student with all the busyness that's going on, but that's wonderful. Nick is an amazing student. Your albums, your music, they take us through so many different emotions. But one thing that I'm left with after listening to so many songs is this feeling of hope and positivity. And that is so refreshing, especially post-pandemic times or even during pandemic times. And I'm just curious if you're aware that you sort of give off this ebullience in your music, and how much that is something that you're trying to do when you're sort of drawing up these songs. Like, are you really trying to lift people up, and is that part of a part of the journey?
gosh, no, I'm not. I'm not, like, I guess I never thought of it like that, honestly, Beerus. Like, I play music I'd want to hear, so I think that probably just comes from who I am, I can only listen to so many really slow songs. Like, that's just not my jam. Like, I love Lizzo, like, I love that upbeat stuff. I need that energy, occasionally I do like to slow down, but I just feel like that's what feeds me. And so I play what I want to listen to. So probably it's just who I am. I think that's just a part of who I am. But thank you for recognizing that inside of me. I appreciate that.
Dog in old Makanda town, quicker than the trains that came around. His master ride the dog beside him.
How do you keep a band together?
Again, be kind.
It goes back to the same stuff.
Yeah, for real. I mean, definitely. I mean, like, it's a small town here, but everywhere. Like, I hear this from all my friends who live in Nashville, friends who live in Chicago. They're like, it's like, when it comes to playing music, like, there's only so many drummers in town. There's only so many bass players in town. So you start burning through it, like, people are going to talk.
Right.
So you just be kind and just just if you're in it for the long haul, like for me, like there's not an expiration date on me wanting to play music. So like, I just try to see like this long arc of history and like what, playing music for a long time. So I just chill and enjoy the ride.
Do you think maybe that's also part of this sort of thing where you were talking about young people leaving the community for like the bigger cities, and this idea that maybe they're the types of people that are going to burn the bridges, right? Because they think it's more of a commodity, what whoever they're interacting with, right? It's much more opportunistic, where because you have this long haul approach, it's sort of like, well, no, I'm rooted in something, and there's a kind of value in that. And I think your music is rooted, right? And it's kind of grounded in space, it's grounded in location, it's grounded in feeling. And so um kind of, at least for me, it's sort of teaching me that too. That's kind of the lesson that I'm getting from it, that maybe one of the best things that our students, maybe they could do if they're trying to form a band, or they're trying to form a film label or whatever, or production label, maybe it's about doing the opposite of what they think. Maybe it's about staying in Southern Illinois and planting roots like you've done, actually, you know.
I don't begrudge anybody who takes any path that they choose. It's, there's value in leaving your hometown and traveling, like absolutely. And I don't mean to say anything negative about anybody moving to city. Like I don't have like a urban versus rural, like that's not my thing, like I totally get it and I love it. Like I was born in Houston, Texas. Like we lived in Glassboro, New Jersey for a while. So this is my chosen place for now, and who knows, I may get up and move sometime. We'll see. But I think there is value in establishing, like you said, roots and community wherever you are. Um, Community is so important. It's so important. It's more than just like it's support. It belonging to something bigger than yourself is important. Whatever you want to deem that as, whatever community you want to deem that as, but it's really important. And I think any artist should try to see their town, the place that they're in, as a resource and a like something to build there, um, and not shrug it off. You know what I mean? Wherever you land, there's value. Um, yeah.
Wow, I love that. I love that sort of sky is blue wherever you go, and your community goes with you. It's a very sort of like Zen Buddhist thing. They say like wherever you go, actually you shouldn't be a Buddhist. You should be whatever religion is the place that you go. And that's kind of like the philosophy that you're taking with music and in your person. It's just fantastic. And I so appreciate it. I'm going to
Well,
go ahead and open it up to our students. So, Nick, if you have any questions, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I was interested in what's been discussed so far. I was thinking a lot about just sense of place, ecologies of place, and sort of the infinite amount of stories that can be told in any place. So I guess sort of do you think about that in your work? And I guess the second half of the question would be, what is it about Southern Illinois that is incredibly inspiring to you? Is it like a season? Is it, is there a particular season that you love, maybe that has inspired you, or specific things about the place that has sparked a lot of work for you?
it's summer. It's just so nice here in the summer. It's 100 and no, I'm just kidding. We have the worst summers. um, Explain the first question again for me. What do you mean by you saying like ecologies of place? What do you mean? I'm just curious, Nick. Also, great questions.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I guess just sort of the ecosystem that makes up this area, and the people and the sort of the nature and the environments, that sort of is the makeup of Southern Illinois that sort of stands out to you.
Yeah. Well, I think this area is, I mean, this is an area that is, when I think of Southern Illinois, I think of the environment. You know what I mean? Like it's the people, yes, but like people move and stay here because we're in the middle of the Shawnee National Forest, and this is gorgeous. Like if you go 2 hours north, like it's Flatsville for a while, you know, it's plains, and that's fine. You know, some people really enjoy and love that. I really like having the nature and the environment, and I think it offers, you know, it creates a community of like hikers and outdoor enthusiasts, and those people tend to, you know, love and reflect on nature, and that maybe that's why I have this sort of Buddhist Zen approach. Because I think just reflecting on nature, I think it gives you time and space to reflect on the beauty that's around here. And also with that, being in a rural area, you don't have the same, how would you describe it, like the same communal infrastructure, like the same entertainment opportunities that you would in big cities. So you're sort of, you become a little bit more independent and, you know, reliant on whatever is available. Like you have to, like if there's a need for something, you have to fill that, like because there's just not as many resources in this rural area, so it kind of forces you to into it like a DIY scene, so to speak. um so there's a lot of space for being an independent artist here, and I really really like that. Like the show we did on Sunday, I sold tickets through my website, you know, and I hired door people, merch people, I hired people, you know, we had people running sound. Like that was all something that we did. Like that wasn't some outside agency, like we did all that. And that's really nice that we have the ability to do that. And your second question, what is it about Southern Illinois? I think that nature. I think we're just like, you know, I had friends from West Virginia come by and they're like, man, this looks just like West Virginia. This looks like that rolling Appalachian like hills. Like this is gorgeous. And I think like it always surprises people because they're like, Illinois is either Chicago or farms, like corn. And then this tip of the state is actually used to be referred to as the Illinois Ozarks. Um, so that's like this beautiful natural area. And I think like that kind of culture and community that's cultivated around there is just really attractive to me. I love hiking, and, you know, I think that I could go on forever, but I think I answered your question. Did I answer your question, Nick?
Yeah, yeah, yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
maybe too much. I was gonna go on about like, oh, and you know, like if you're out in nature, you could use, you know, you want to bring acoustic instruments, which is why there's so many acoustic built bands around here, because they start around, you know, jams around bonfires, and so they're like just guitar based upright. That's why there's like such a strong American roots aesthetic around here versus maybe electronic music, you know what I mean? I think it's built around the natural environment. Nick, great
Nick,
question.
it's just you. So any other questions? It's a one-on-one.
Oh wow. I'm just holding up the I'm speaking for all students.
Well,
Um,
I think, Nick, I think what's
Yes.
important right now is for you to ask questions that are relevant to you and what you're doing, sonically and visually with your filmmaking right now, and
sure.
how Professor Pape can help you or think about how you're doing what you're
What
doing very specifically, you know?
what are you doing, Nick? What's your deal? What are you doing right now?
Yeah, just I just finished a narrative film, and right now I'm working on a narrative documentary fusion type film. But I guess maybe to ask a question, something that stood out about your process, you mentioned this idea of before you even start recording, you've already organically um, established a rapport with your band and your group on respective songs and tracks and albums and things like this. Can you sort of talk more about that and the importance of um, establishing chemistry, whether that might be with a band, or in my case, which would be, with a production team, film crew, and sort of how that is important to you?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, this project, like this last project, We Are for Egypt, this is one of those things, one of those times where like I got to work with people who weren't necessarily in my band. And so that was a nice, you know, like just nice collaboration of new faces, you know. But either way, I think you'll find that you will just find things to relate about. Of course, if you're in this business, you guys are going to immediately talk about what you're both into. You're like, oh, I like this movie, or I love this documentary. I love, for me, I'm like, ooh, I love this artist. I love that what they just released. Did you hear what they just put out? Did you hear they're working with this producer? So you find those little conversations. I think well, I'm trying to speak to the filmmaker, but as a musical artist. But I would say if you're trying to establish rapport, also talk about things that aren't work related. you know, talk about things that are like fun and life, and not just like hitting the books and doing that kind of thing, but like what sparks you. What do you like? What movie did you watch that just brought you to tears recently, that just made you laugh? Find ways to connect that aren't just quote unquote work related. I think that's important. Like for us, I get chance to play music with the guys very often, so we get that opportunity. But we also see each other out and about, and so we'll have soup swaps. We'll be like, we'll make a soup, we'll share it all together as a group, and just trying to do things unrelated to music, just getting together. So establishing rapport, it goes to just being like treating them like a friend, being kind, and there's always going to be folks who aren't your cup of tea, and you don't have to be their best friend, but you can still respect them. You can still treat them the way they want to be treated, and give them. Some people need more space and they don't want to connect with you, and you're just doing a job, and that's fine too. That's, you can respect that, because they're obviously in a place in their lives where they just want to do this one thing, and that's fine. You don't have to understand everything about people to connect. You know what I mean? You don't have to assume, you know, don't take things personal. You just have to assume, like, like, I'm just going to keep doing my thing. I'm here to make music. You're here to make movies. I'm going to keep doing my thing. If they gel, we gel. If not, that's okay. We can get this job done without having to be besties. We can respect each other. There's a mutual respect there. And, I think that's an important thing to consider. Is rapport is good, but just be aware, not everybody's going to be down, and you just have to be kind and say, okay, that's what you want to do, and that's fine.
So you can still make good music even though you're not
Yeah.
besties.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's sometimes I play with people who are acquaintances, sometimes people I play with I never see again. And that's just happens. You just keep like focusing on what you're doing and enjoying. If you enjoy what you do, that will come across, and that will come out, and that light will just pour forth. And people will be here for it, and people won't. And that's just the way of how things go.
Do you ever do like a one thing for me that I often do before a shoot is I'll make brunch for everybody.
Oh, that's so nice.
And then I feel like I let all like the camera people, they just talk cameras for like 15 minutes. But then it's like I make everyone sit around a table. Mm-hmm. And so like they're forced to like not talk about cameras because they're sitting in front of like an actor. And so they just talk about whatever, yeah. And it just becomes like family time in a way, even though it's not a family. But I feel like that's kind of echoing what you're talking about. Do you ever do anything like that in the studio, or like or is it just, it's sort of organic? You just bring up topics that are just not music related?
Yeah, I think at this point, like you said, it's just organic, and you're just sort of, you're finding these conversations and finding things you like, and you're just connecting in any way you can connect. I love the idea of you making space for that connection. That's really nice. Like also, Pirooz, like, your students, I hope they know how fortunate they are to have you, because if you're looking for like an ideal director, producer, I think you are one. I think you are an excellent one. Like you've done your research, you've made me feel so comfortable. So I hope that your students realize how much of a treasure that you are. So just throwing that out there. It's recorded forever, so don't edit that out.
The truth of this is you can see it because you're the treasure. And so you see the treasure in me. That's the truth.